Another random video, not so much random for me, but a few random things along the way. I'm just going to show you a few things. So I've got this part in the sandblast cabinet, or B-blast cabinet, whichever way you want to call it. You guys have probably seen this before. Just going to go through a couple of things along the way, sort of make a bit of a video out of this one. For those guys who might be interested, it's just a bit of information and just a bit of, I suppose, things that I've learned along the way of doing different jobs and so on. Just share my experience. I suppose that's what YouTube videos are all about. I will be coming back to this blast cabinet again in a little project to do. I think I've shown you guys before. I put this dust extraction pipe in that's used to have a vacuum unit outside of the unit, and I've just put on a 2-inch pipe going up to the ceiling where my dust extractor is. It's similar to your wood chip type of extractor. It's about 1,000 cubic feet. Thereabouts, so it's not too bad. It does fairly well, but the problem is the amount of air coming into the amount of air going out doesn't really work very well. So I'm looking at upgrading the dust extraction unit, and probably show you guys what I've done, and it might help you guys who've got the blast cabinet and might find yourself in the same position. So what I've got at the moment is I get to the point now. What I've got now is a part of my Mazak, of course. Never-ending story. This is off the actual tailstock itself. So this is one part I did miss, amongst other parts that I've done. It's an end cap, which I'll show you shortly. So what I've done is obviously blasted it, and being a hydraulic unit, obviously garnet's not going to go too well in a hydraulic unit, so we have to do some other cleaning prior to painting, because I don't really want to wash it in any solvent after obviously painting. I need to leave the part sit for approximately about a week for it to really harden really well. That's what the recommendation is, the manufacturer. It is fairly warm today, so I'm jumping in the middle of my work just to get this one part finished, so I can just get this part screwed on, so I can get the actual tailstock. I suppose the bulk of it back together. There's a lot of ancillary things on the outside to go. I'm just going to quickly show you what I do to, I suppose, get up to a painted point. We'll just go over and show you a bit of painting, and it's not a lesson on painting, which just, as I say, it's just the things that I've learned to share with you guys, and a few other random things along the way. So next thing to do is, as I say, I've blasted it now, cleaned it with compressed air, and we're going to go over to the parts washer and then give it a wash, and we'll just go through the sequence of what I do to do that. So just got this sitting in my, I suppose, dirty wash as I call it. You can see the solution's a little bit dirty, but probably looks fairly clean on the video, but not that clean when actually looking with your eye. This is a hot tank, not a hot tank as per se, but you can heat up the solution to about 50 degrees C, which does give it a bit more biting power when you've got to clean something. But I usually just find using the solvent just straight out is in a room temperature type of environment, it works well enough. So what I'll do is I just let that run sitting there and just let it flush through for a little while, just try to wash out. What I'm trying to do is just get the garnet out of the actual part and just give it a bit of a, just sort of flushing everything out best I can. It's probably a little bit hard to video it and show you guys at the same time, but normally when you do blast something, those threads there you can either got the option of putting something into those threads there, so you've got some hydraulic fittings coming in on the side there. You've got an option of putting something in, as I say, a plug or even the fitting. They're just standard BSP tapered fittings, and you've got that option. But I did leave it out because I did want to flush out some of the crap that's in there. It's a thread tapered sealant, hydraulic sealant and so on that's in there, so I wanted to get that out of there. So if you ever do blast something, any sort of threads, make sure you always ream those threads out with a tap or a reamer, thread reamer, if you've got those sort of things available. So I won't be cutting those threads. I do have a reamer set that I can actually ream the threads with, because you don't really want to cut the thread, you don't want to remove material, you just want to clean it, just clean it up. This is not a moving part, so it just does bolt on at the end of the actual tailstock, which I'll show you. So I'll just pause that out, and I'll just take you over to the second wash quickly. But just make sure you're trying to get as much of that garnet out. So as I say, this is the dirty wash, so all the rubbish gets flushed out here. And then I have another parts washer that I use for cleaning the parts. So depending on the degree of how dirty the parts are, they go here first, and anything that's just mildly clean, I'll be cleaning what I call the clean wash, as much as if that makes sense. So I've just finished doing that, and I'll bring you back. Pretty much the same thing again. All I'm doing here is the second wash now. As you can see, the parts washer colour's changed. I bought this unit second hand. I won't run through too much of a backstory of it, but I bought this unit second hand. I needed 2 parts washers, and I already had the other one, and I bought this one second hand and had it powder coated in a nice bright orange colour to try and get it back to a nice condition again. So it's all been sandblasted, undercoat, powder coat, you know the story of my powder coat, and then top coated that nice bright orange colour. As you can probably see through the corner at the back there, powder coat's actually starting to come off, so I was a bit surprised to see that happen. So I talked to the powder coating guys, and they were sort of scratching their heads to why. I mean, this is a water-based solvent. They said, geez, it must be some pretty aggressive stuff. So they said that they could re-powder coat it for me, but I'm probably just going to finish up the same thing again, so I probably won't worry about it. What I'm probably looking at doing is making exactly the same thing again, with a stainless steel tank, basically. Be a lot better than anyway for longevity, and a bit more appealing. But I don't mind the orange colour, sort of like the sort of traditional orange colour, nice bright orange colour. But as I say, you can probably see at the back there, the powder coat, you can sort of see bits of it, not too bad. And other parts of it where it's peeled off, so I've tried to scrub it off because I wanted to try and get rid of all the loose bits because it was getting into my parts. So this is a fairly clean washer. This has only just been changed probably a month ago. It doesn't get used that much. Most of the parts on the Mazak are mostly being done as far as dirty parts go now, so this is just the clean wash. So this is just to wash more so, not the actual part itself, but this is just to wash the muck off that's left over from that dirty wash, all the stuff that comes through. So to say, so the first wash is just to get all the dust, not so much the garnet, but there is probably a small amount of garnet left in there. Could you actually point it apart? So this is a bit of the pain. Normally you wouldn't have to go for this much trouble, but because it's a hydraulic part, obviously don't want any garnet in there at all. But this is just to get rid of the greasy film that's left on there, more so just for painting more than anything else. So it is a fair bit of stuffing around just for this one little part to go for all this work. So I'll probably leave this sitting in there for maybe about 5 minutes. In the last wash I left it running with its face down like that, just letting it fill up with solvent and letting it overflow, and just try to wash out most of the... So we'll just clean that, and then we'll go on to the next part, which is over to the paint, and we'll just do a bit of a look along the way of other things I'm doing along the way up. So I'll just get that done, and I'll keep going. As I've mentioned, there'll be some random things along the way just to mix the video up a little bit. I've washed that part out in water now. As with every positive, there's a negative, and every negative has a positive. With that solvent, as I mentioned earlier, it is a water-based solvent, so you need to wash it out in water after, just to take away the reaction from the metal. And the main thing then after do that is to give it a good dry. So it's sitting out in the sun at the moment, so it's a fairly warm day today. The plus and the negatives of the paint that I do use is it needs to be fairly warm. The hotter it is, well, I can't say extremely hot, but if it leave it in a fairly high ambient temperature of 30 degrees plus or 30 degrees C plus, it does harden a lot better, I've found. And so that's the main thing. I'm jumped into doing this job today to get it done. Just this one part, and I've got to get back to another job straight away. So I just sort of jumped in because it was hot today. It's going to be about 43 degrees C today, so a fairly warm day for working, but perfect day for painting. So I'll paint that this morning and leave that sitting in my garage to just sit there baking away in that nice warm day. So just got you pointed at a Mazak part at the moment. If you wonder what this bloody piece of shit, this odd looking piece of sheet metal is. So this is my work in progress, as you can probably see. So I'm in my grinding room at the moment. So got this standing up against the wall, doing this in between other jobs. I'm trying to go for a quick thing of it. So this is the panel I talked about, goes the full length of the machine. So from one end, so you can say this is the tailstock, I'm getting the wrong end around. The bottom there is the, I suppose, where the spindle motor is, so that sits above the spindle motor. Working our way along, so have some hydraulics there. So where that ground area is inside the actual cabinet area. So it was fairly sort of beat up because parts flying off the chucker hitting it. So I've had to come in, straighten it and sand it off that paint. So I've got to weld a piece of angle frame there. So that's a fluoro light to go in there. So I'll probably maybe look at putting an LED type of strip type of light in there. So that's to light up your actual cabinet area. And then working our way down the other end, so that part going off the left there just goes down to the transformer and some hydraulic lines. So this takes all your services from this end, which is the controller and tailstock, way down to the other end, which is the, I suppose, the behind the chuck itself, so down the spindle motor end. But that, as I say, that'll make a bit more sense as we're working our way through. So stopping elsewhere along the way, this is my job for today. So I've got the machine running at the moment, so just warming up the spindle. I always warm up the spindles on all my machines, no matter what it is, mills, lathes, doesn't matter what, it doesn't have to be CNC. So I run the spindle at a low speed. You can probably see it's spinning fairly slow at the moment, about 300 RPM. I let it run there for maybe 15-20 minutes and then come back and let it run at a higher speed, maybe, well, it's sort of set at a 600 RPM, but I can go up to 120%, which takes you to 720 RPM. Maybe run it there for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then run the whole table around left to right, so give it a good run, giving it a good wipe of oil across the linear slides and the ball screw. So that's the idea of it. And the turret is down at the moment, the spindle is down at the moment. So what I do is I put it down, so it has an automatic lube system on it, so when it fires up, this is parked there overnight, I forgot to mention. Park the spindle in the lowered position overnight, so when I start it up, it references back to the up position ready to start, and it wipes the slideways with a new lot of oil when the machine starts up first thing in the morning or whenever you turn the machine on. So that's why the actual spindle sitting just above the work, if you're wondering why that is. So as I say, so that's just running at the moment. I just got that running. Go away and get this part done and just take you over to the actual Mazak now, show you where that part actually goes on. So as I mentioned, a random video of random things, I suppose you could say. So this is the tailstock, as you can probably see, down towards the machine. So obviously there's no cabinets on at the moment. You guys have seen a few videos on this now. So that part actually bolts onto here. So this doesn't actually travel. This is just the activation area where the hydraulic hoses come in to actuate the cylinder to either extend the turret or the actual, I'll take around the other side so I can explain a bit better so I know what I'm talking about too. So to extend the spindle nose out, so this extends out about 150 mil or 6 inches. So this brings it out. You can actually run the tailstock down, so I'll sort of show you. So this is hydraulically driven, hydraulically driven via a chain, which I'll probably show you in a later video if I get a chance to do it before I put the cover on. So this travels along, so this is hydraulically driven by, as I say, by an hydraulic unit that drives a chain which pulls the actual turret backwards and forwards. Be nice to have that on a manual machine, wouldn't it? And then you have it hydraulically driven, so that you bring this up into a rough position where you probably want it, and then you're extending this out to your job, obviously moving it. You can program, this is a full programmable tailstock, so you can actually drive in both. You can actually drive the actual body itself and the actual spindle itself, or where your actual live center sits, or whatever you might have in there. In the case of the CNC, it's always live center because you run your drill chucks in your actual turret. You don't do any drilling from this, obviously. This just activates out. There's no real control. There's no real actually speed control on this. Maybe you can variate the pressure of the oil if you wanted to, but no, it just extends out and holds your long shafts in position between your chuck and your tailstock, a la your sort of manual machines. Just bring you into my garage now to get ready to do some painting now. So the bits and pieces that I'll be using for the painting, I use a brand of paint called Valspar. It's a fairly well-known brand. I've seen a few guys in the US on different videos that I've watched. These guys, different guys have used it. There's obviously different ranges of it. This is the 300 series. Is a 2-pack paint. Obviously the most important thing is the paint. And we've got some thinners up here and the hardener over here. I'll just go for a bit of a run through, just mixing it up. I've got 2 little cups here. These are just lids off the aerosol, so I keep these just for for this, exactly perfect for this sort of thing. It's good for standing parts up on where you're going to spray, and also I use this for mixing up paint and also decanting the paint from, or getting the paint, in an easier way of saying it, getting the paint out of the tin and into one of these. So we're only spraying a small part. As you can see, this is ready now, so this has all been blasted. So it's been sitting out in the sun, so it's got a little bit of warmth in it now. So you just want to bring the part up to a reasonable temperature. It doesn't be anything too hot. You don't want the paint to flash off too quick. This paint air dries fairly quickly, which is good about this particular actual paint here, this 300 series paint. There is another one that takes about probably 6 hours to probably touch dry, so that's a bit of a pain in the ass paint to use. I've used that to paint my fence post in front of my house before I put them in. But the only downside is you get overspray, so it's got about 6 hours to stick to everything before it actually dries. So you've got to be careful when you're spraying it in a garage, otherwise you finish overspray all over everything, and that particular colour is black. So you finish up with overspray over everything, sticking to anything. As you can imagine, 6 hours to float around there sticking to stuff, so it is a pain of a paint to use, but this one's not too bad. This probably air dries. You probably touch dry on the actual part after a reasonable coat, probably air dries, not quite to touch, it's got a bit of a skin on it, maybe after about 5 minutes. So just something simple, just go through the bits and pieces. I don't need to teach you how to paint, but just a little pry to open up the tin, makes it a bit easier rather than using a screwdriver. So it's got a little hook on the end of it, so you can actually get under the lid trying to get it off rather than using a screwdriver. A couple of mixing sticks. This is what they call a 4:1 ratio, so we use this stick to measure out quantities. So you measure up to those ranges if you haven't done any painting before. So obviously you've got your base, which is paint, your hardener, and then your reducer, which is your thinners. And so in two-pack terms, they call reducer, not thinners. So you can sort of see your ranges there. You run up to 1, which we'll be mixing to. I'll just quickly show you that just for curiosity. I haven't been doing a lot of videos, sort of how-to videos. And of course, obviously the spray gun. So it's a gravity-fed gun, so the paint actually drains in from above rather than your sort of standard spray guns, which is called suction guns. You have your spray pot below, normally maybe about 1 litre or a bit more over, depending on the size of the gun. But with the 2-pack, you normally use what's called a gravity-fed pot. So as I say, you just put your paint in from above, so it's got a removable lid. You just pour the paint in there and just put your paint in and start spraying. The good thing about it is you have got a lot of good clearance underneath the part, so you're not dragging the pot over something as you're trying to spray to. That's the other advantage with the gravity-fed guns, that you're sort of spraying. You can sort of imagine you've got your hose coming in from the bottom and you're trying to spray a part. You've normally got a pot hanging in below with your normal standard spray guns, so you sort of have a chance of bumping the corner of the pot trying to get in to paint something. Not so bad with this particular part, but you know what I mean. If you're just trying to get into a tight spot and you just brush the actual pot across the part. So I'll just pause it and I'll bring you back, just sort of mix up the paint, and then I'll get this part painted, and I might just bring you back to just show you what it looks like finished. I'd like to just show you the whole sequence, but it's a bit hard to film and do this at the same time, and I couldn't be bothered getting the tripod and putting the camera on. So as you can see, the first part is the paint up to that number 1 mark. So you just, as I say, they're just your ratios of how much paint you want to mix up. And the next one's the hardener, and then the thinners. I probably don't need to show you any more than that. I'm pretty sure you get the gist of how that works. As I say, so you fill the next one up with hardener up to that number 1 mark, and then the reducer up to the next mark, depending on how thin the mixture should be, or the viscosity of the paint should be. I normally just run up to that first mark. You can just see over to the right hand side of the stick. I just sort of just show you that, just might be handy for guys who are doing 2-pack or never have, and just sort of curious about how you measure the ratios of the hardener to the thinners or the reducer. And then I'll just bring you back for the finished part. The things you don't want to happen off camera, but they do, as you can see by that nice patch of nice creamy coloured paint there. I had a little bit of a mishap. Just as I was just about to switch off the video, the stick fell over and just sort of started to pull the pot over a little bit. I managed to grab it, but obviously I spilled a little bit out. I managed to mix up another little bit of paint. So as you can see, there's a little pot of paint there, and we've got our part for saying you have used these aerosol caps to use as a pedestal. but we're not going to spray underneath, but it's just to get the part up off the surface, so we're not we haven't got a hard edge to try and get down to the spray gun. More so just to get the spray gun low enough, so we're not trying to spray down into a corner. Just lifts the part up. Eventually I get it right. Lifts the part up so you can spray it at a height where you're actually shooting straight at it, not shooting down onto it. So you want the gun sort of spraying directly onto its face. So it just helps to get the coverage. You could put, as I said before, you can put plugs or fittings in here to cover up the thread, but I will be reaming those threads out, so I'm not concerned about that. But normally you would probably do that. And as I say, in my case, I just wanted to clean out most of the gunk out of there to try and clean as much crap out of the bore. So I've blasted all down those boards. So I'll be, as I say, reaming those threads out and getting that all cleaned up so it's ready to put back together. So there is a fair bit of work just in this little paint. This little part is a pretty major job, as you can see. I know I haven't shown you much of it in time. You've been fast forwarded through most of it, but I'll just quickly get this painted and then I'll just bring you back for the finished part. I nearly forgot to take my spray mask off before I started talking. So as you can see, the part's all nice and painted now. Probably the hardest thing is just getting down inside those little counter bores there. Try not to touch it. Just trying to get the paint down there without getting too much overspray. Although, well, I shouldn't say overspray, trying to put the paint on too thick. So on the flat surface there, it's not too bad, but just being careful to not overspray and get a big run down the side of it or something. But as you can see, that's just the first coat, so I'll let that dry for about 5 minutes. So it flushes up pretty quick. You have to recoat after about 10 minutes. They recommend no more. Anything after that, you have to sand it back down to take the gloss off. So it is a great paint, but there is a fair bit of mucking around with it. And the great thing about it is you don't need to use primer. So that's just gone straight over the blasted surface. You can option to put etch prime on, but apparently there's no gain in putting the etch primer on. It just wears as hard as what it would be if you just painted over the blasted surface. Most guys won't go for the trouble of blasting things prior to painting, but in my case it's probably the ultimate thing to do is to spray to eventually get it right again. Blast something prior to painting to try and get everything clean. This part wasn't too bad because it was a hydraulic part, but there was a lot of oil and so forth all over the part, obviously, when I pulled it apart, so it needs to be washed, blasted, washed again, prepped and painted. So there's a lot of mucking around just to paint a simple part like this. That's why I just decided to do this video. It is a bit longer than I was planning, but it was a little bit to fit in there. But I'll just let that air dry now and then give that another coat, and then just let it sit in my garage just baking away. Just another little tip for you guys: if you ever do any painting, you've got these cover sheets you can get from a local timber yard. You can just put these on the floor. You can generally get them for free, depending on how stingy they are. The guy is you're asking for. Sometimes they try and charge you for them, but they're off the tops of packs, and you can normally get them for free. And they're just handy to put on the floors. As you can see, I've painted a fair few things at different times. I just put those on the floor, and if I'm painting heavily, I just put them up against the wall. Plus have some tarps to cover if I'm painting larger areas. But in the case of this small part, it was obviously not too much concern. I just wanted to try and keep the overspray off the floor. It's easy to put these sheets on the floor than it is to clean up the overspray, so that's the main reason for that. Just so I just show you that, just a little tip of a painting. Just put that on the floor in case you spill any paint, like I did, but I didn't spill it on the floor. You don't have to worry about trying to clean it off the concrete, so you just got it sitting on those timber boards. Just a bit of a handy thing if you ever do any painting, rather than having tarps and things on the floor you're tripping over. Just use these cover sheets. But if you stayed for this long, I'm happy, but if you didn't, that's fine. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one, and we'll hopefully get down to that machinery supplier soon. Okay, talk to you guys soon. Okay, bye for now.